In a one-room walk-up in 1968, a single burner hot plate hummed on a kitchen table from sundown until the news came on. That little coil heated supper for a widow living on $12 a week. It warmed the saucer of a retired Pullman porter and the kettle of a great aunt who had outlived two husbands. Number 24 on this list quietly stretched one chicken neck into 3 nights of broth. Number 16 was the supper a senior made every Friday because Friday was payday at the post office. Number 8 on this list turned a can of evaporated milk into something our elders called grace. Folks called it poor cooking, yet our mothers and grandmothers turned that single coil into a whole kitchen. So hit subscribe and plug in the hot plate because here are 30 cheap African American hot plate meals for seniors living alone. Number 30, hot plate hoe cakes. Cornmeal saved more black seniors than any pension check ever did. On a single coil, a widow could mix a half cup of stone ground meal with hot water, a shake of salt, and a spoon of bacon grease saved in a coffee can on the windowsill. She patted the batter flat in a small black pan and let it crisp on one side until the edges curled like a fall leaf. 1 hoe cake was supper. 2 with a smear of molasses was Sunday. Buffalo soldiers carried hoe cakes in their saddlebags, and church mothers slid them under tea towels for the sick and shut-in. For a senior alone, this was the meal that turned a quarter-pounder meal into dignity on a chipped plate. Number 29, neck bone and rice. Pork neck bones sold for 19 cents a pound at the corner market in 1972, and a senior could feed herself for 3 days on 2 pounds. She covered the bones with water on the hot plate, dropped in a halved onion, a bay leaf, and a shake of red pepper, and let it work for an hour while she watched the stories. The broth turned the color of weak tea, and she pulled the meat off the knuckles with the same patience her mother used at the wash line. Long grain rice went into the pot last, swelling slow in that pork sweet broth. 1 pot fed Monday's supper, Tuesday's lunch over toast, and Wednesday's bowl with a little vinegar splashed on top. Folks called it leftover. Our elders called it stretched right. Number 28, stewed tomato and bread. By the time supper rolled around, a widow's pantry was often down to a can of Del Monte stewed tomatoes and the heel of a day-old loaf. She poured the 14-ounce can into a small saucepan on the coil, added a spoon of sugar to cut the tan taste, and dropped in 2 slices of torn-up white bread. The bread soaked up the broth and went soft like baby food. She finished it with a knob of margarine and a turn of black pepper from the shaker she had carried up from Arkansas in 1953. Working mothers in Birmingham fed this to teething babies and bedridden grandparents from the same chipped bowl. For a dime and a quiet 5 minutes, it was supper that knew how to stretch a single tin into something a senior could call dinner on a Wednesday night. Number 27, liver and onions on the coil. Beef liver was the cheapest cut on the butcher's tray in the 1960s, often 2 slices for 30 cents, and a senior with a hot plate could turn it into a meal that tasted like a holiday. She salted a thin slice, dredged it in flour from a paper sack, and laid it in a hot pan with a tablespoon of lard. Sliced yellow onion went in beside it and softened to gold while the liver browned on one side. The whole thing finished in under 8 minutes on that single coil, iron-rich, deep-flavored, and gentle on a senior's worn-out teeth. Pullman porters used to order this in railroad diners, and black grandmothers cooked it on Tuesdays because Tuesday was the day the doctor said your blood needed it. Number 26, salmon patty supper. A can of bumblebee pink salmon at the A&P cost about 49 cents in 1968, and one can stretch into 4 patties on a senior's hot plate. She drained the can over the sink, picked out the soft round bones with her thumb the way her mother taught her, and mashed the flesh into a chipped mixing bowl with a cracked egg, a handful of crushed saltines, and a chopped scallion from the windowsill jar of water. A pinch of black pepper, no salt because the tin already had plenty. She shaped 4 flat cakes the size of a tea saucer and slid them into a buttered skillet on the coil. 5 minutes aside, no more, or they went dry. The kitchen smelled like the river road back home in Louisiana. 2 patties was Tuesday's supper. The other 2 went into wax paper for tomorrow's lunch at the senior center, and nobody ever guessed they came out of a tin on a single coil. Number 25, fried bologna and light bread. Oscar Mayer bologna ran 59 cents a pack at the corner grocery, and 1 pack made supper for almost a week if a senior cooked smart. She cut 4 little slits around the edge of a thick slice so it would not balloon up on her, then dropped it onto a dry hot plate skillet. The bologna bubbled, curled into a shallow bowl, and crisped around the rim. 2 slices of light bread, a smear of yellow mustard, and a leaf of iceberg if the welfare box had been generous that week. Black children walking home from school in Detroit could smell this sandwich from the porch. For a senior eating alone, it was Tuesday's supper that felt like Saturday. Number 24, 3-night chicken neck broth. Here is the supper from the intro, the one that stretched a single chicken neck into 3 nights of broth. The butcher on Hastings Street in Detroit sold a bag of necks for 29 cents in 1969, but 1 neck alone could feed a widow for half a week if she knew the trick. She covered a single neck with 3 cups of water on the hot plate, dropped in a stub of celery, half an onion, and a pinch of poultry seasoning. She let it murmur for 40 minutes, then pulled the neck out and saved it in a saucer in the icebox. Monday night, she ladled the broth over crumbled cornbread. Tuesday, she boiled rice in what was left and called it dinner. Wednesday, she shredded the meat off the neck bone, dropped it back into the last cup of broth with a little flour gravy, and ate it over toast. 3 nights, 1 neck, 29 cents. That coil did the work 3 grown men in a kitchen could not. Number 23, hot plate grits and cheese. Quaker Quick Grits cost about 33 cents a box in 1971, and 1 box fed a senior for 2 weeks of breakfast and 4 suppers. She stirred a 1/4 cup of grits into a cup of boiling water on the coil, dropped in a pat of margarine, and grated in a corner of rat cheese, the sharp orange block that came wrapped in red wax. The grits went thick and creamy in under 5 minutes. She ate it from the same speckled tin bowl her mother carried up from Alabama. For seniors in Harlem walk-ups, this was the meal you could stir with 1 hand while you read the paper with the other. Number 22, pinto beans and hot water cornbread. A bag of dried pintos at the Piggly Wiggly cost 23 cents in 1965, and that bag was a week of suppers for a widow with a single coil. She soaked a cup overnight in a coffee mug, drained them in the morning, and set them to simmer with a ham hock end and a halved onion. By supper time, the pot smelled like the back of her mother's kitchen in Tennessee. While the beans cooked, she stirred a half cup of meal with boiling water and a spoon of grease, patted out 2 flat cornbread cakes, and crisped them in the bean pot juice. Beans over the bread, hot sauce on top. Supper for a quarter. Number 21, skillet smothered cabbage. Cabbage was the cheapest green on the produce stand in winter, often 19 cents a head at the black-owned grocery on Auburn Avenue in Atlanta. A senior could quarter that head and feed herself for 3 days on 1 hot plate. She rendered a strip of fat back in the pan, sliced the cabbage thin, and let it wilt down with a splash of water from the kettle. A dash of vinegar at the end, a turn of pepper, and a stewed tomato spooned over the top if she had one in the cupboard. Cabbage shrinks to nothing on the coil, so what looked like supper for 4 became supper for one with leftovers for the morning. Number 20, hot plate sweet potato. A pound of sweet potatoes at the Saturday Curb Market in Charleston ran 15 cents in 1966, and one fat potato was a senior's whole supper. She did not have an oven in her rooming house, but she had that coil. She cut the potato into 4 thick rounds, set them in a small black pan with a ½ inch of water and a pat of margarine, covered the pan with a saucer, turned upside down, and let it steam on low for 20 minutes. The water boiled off and the bottoms caramelized in the leftover margarine until the edges were the color of dark honey. She mashed it on her plate with a fork, sprinkled brown sugar from a Save packet, and ate it with a spoon. Sweet, hot, and filling for a nickel and change. Number 19, the hot plate itself. The single burner hot plate has its own history, and it is worth telling because that little coil shaped how a whole generation of Black seniors ate alone. The first electric hot plates rolled out of factories in the early 1920s, sold by Sears Roebuck for around $4, but they did not reach poor and Black households in any real number until after World War II, when surplus Army models hit the secondhand stores along Lenox Avenue and South Parkway for $2.50. By the late 1950s, rooming houses across the country, from Harlem to Houston to East St. Louis to North Philadelphia, banned full kitchens to cut their fire insurance bills in half. Landlords allowed exactly one hot plate per tenant, sometimes chained to the table leg with a length of bicycle cable so it could not walk off in the night. The Westinghouse 500-watt model, with its black bakelite handle and its single chrome dial that turned from low to high with a satisfying click, became the workhorse of senior survival across the urban North. By 1968, Black widows living on Social Security checks of around $55 a month were stretching $12 weekly food allotments across one coil, one kettle, and one well-seasoned iron skillet. The Great Migration delivered millions of Black seniors into northern cities where they aged in single rented rooms with no stove, no oven, no refrigerator beyond a small icebox in the hallway. The hot plate was not a convenience. It was a kitchen, a memory keeper, and a quiet partner at the table. The part that surprised me going back through old housing surveys from Chicago and Detroit is how many obituaries from the 1970s mentioned that the deceased had cooked their last 40 years of suppers on a single coil that fit in a shoebox. One burner, 100 recipes, a whole way of living, kept warm by a glow no bigger than a saucer. Number 18, buttermilk and cornbread crumble. A quart of cultured buttermilk cost 29 cents at the dairy case in 1970, and a senior with leftover cornbread could turn it into supper in under 3 minutes on the coil. She warmed the buttermilk in a small pan, just enough to take the chill off, never boiling because boiling broke it into curds. She crumbled day-old cornbread into a tall iced tea glass, poured the warm buttermilk over the top, and ate it with a long-handled iced teaspoon while she sat by the window. Black field hands from the Mississippi Delta carried this supper north into the cities during the Great Migration and never let it go, even when they could afford richer suppers. For a widow with no teeth left for chewing tough meat, the warm bread softened into a comfort that felt like her mother's hand on her back. 3 cents of bread, 7 cents of buttermilk, and a memory served warm in a tall glass on a Tuesday night. Number 17, onion and egg, skillet. When the icebox was bare, except for 2 eggs and half a yellow onion, a senior could still set a real supper on the coil. She sliced the onion thin and dropped it in a hot skillet with a teaspoon of bacon grease from the can on the counter. The onion went translucent and brown around the edges, sweet enough to almost taste like jam. She cracked the 2 eggs right on top of the onions, let the whites set, and broke the yolks with her fork so they ran into the onion gold. Supper from the bottom of the icebox, ready in 7 minutes, eaten standing at the counter with a piece of light bread folded in half, 6 cents on a hard week. Number 16, Friday payday, salmon croquettes with rice. Here's the supper from the intro, the one a senior made every Friday because Friday was payday at the post office. In neighborhoods like Sugar Hill in Harlem and the Hill District in Pittsburgh, retired postal clerks pulled their pension envelope on Friday afternoon and walked straight to the grocer for a can of pink salmon, a small box of long grain rice, and a quart of whole milk. Back in her one-room apartment, the widow set rice on the coil first in a small covered pan, 20 minutes on low. While the rice steamed, she drained the salmon, picked the bones, mashed it with a beaten egg, a quarter cup of cracker crumbs, a chopped green onion, and a turn of black pepper. She shaped 4 little patties the size of a 50-cent piece. The rice came off the coil, the skillet went on with a spoon of bacon grease, and the croquettes browned 3 minutes aside. Friday supper, 2 croquettes on a bed of rice, the other 2 saved for Sunday lunch. Payday tasted like home. Number 15, hot plate red beans on a Tuesday. Down in the 7th Ward of New Orleans, Tuesday was wash day, and wash day meant red beans because the pot could mine itself on the coil while the wringer rolled. A senior could buy a pound of small red beans for 25 cents in 1969 and feed herself for 4 suppers running. She soaked the beans overnight in a chipped enamel basin, drained them at dawn, and set them on her burner with a smoked turkey wing instead of the pork her doctor had taken away. Half an onion, a stub of celery, 2 cloves of garlic, a bay leaf, 2.5 hours on low. The beans went creamy on their own, the wing meat falling off the bone into the potlikker. She ladled them over a scoop of rice from yesterday's pan and ate them on the porch where the radio could reach. Tuesday supper, Wednesday lunch, and a saucer set aside for the neighbor across the hall. Number 14, catfish in a skillet. A small whole catfish at the Saturday Fish Wagon on Auburn Avenue in Atlanta cost about 40 cents in 1967, and the fishmonger would clean it free if the senior asked nice. She carried it home wrapped in newspaper, patted it dry on a flour sack towel, and rolled it in yellow cornmeal, seasoned with a turn of black pepper. Hot grease in the skillet, 3 minutes aside on her coil, and the tail crisped up like a cracker. She set it on a saucer with a wedge of lemon and a slice of light bread folded under the head to catch the drippings. Black widows along the Gulf Coast had been frying small fish on a single burner since the WPA days, when the river gave more than the wage did. Number 13, spaghetti and stewed tomato. By the late 1960s, a box of spaghetti at the black-owned grocery on Vine Street in Cincinnati cost about 19 cents, and a can of Hunt's stewed tomatoes another 23. A senior could break a handful of dry spaghetti in half over a small pot of boiling water on the coil, let it cook 9 minutes, and drain it through the lid pressed against the rim. She poured the stewed tomatoes over the noodles right in the pot, added a knob of margarine and a turn of black pepper, and called it Italian on a hot plate. For a Tuesday supper that needed to feel like something special, this was the meal a senior could put on a chipped plate and not feel sorry for herself. Number 12, smothered potatoes and onion. 3 small potatoes from the bottom of the welfare box, half a yellow onion, and a spoon of bacon grease made a supper that stuck to a senior's ribs all the way through the late news. She sliced the potatoes thin on a chipped saucer with a paring knife worn down to a sliver, halved the onion the same way, and laid them in a hot skillet on the coil with the grease already shimmering. A lid borrowed from a coffee can, 10 minutes on low, then she lifted the lid and let them brown another 5. Salt at the end, never to start, the way her grandmother had taught her on a wood stove in Greenville, Mississippi. Supper for a dime, a brown paper plate, and a quiet kitchen radio. Number 11, hot plate beef hash from a can of Mary Kitchen corned beef hash at the A&P cost about 39 cents in 1971, and one can stretch into 2 solid suppers for a senior with a coil and a little patience. She turned the can out onto a hot, dry skillet, mashed a puck of pink hash flat with the back of a spoon, and let it crust on the bottom for a full 8 minutes without stirring. A cracked egg right on top, lid on, 3 more minutes until the white set and the yolk stayed soft. She slid the whole thing onto a chip plate with a piece of buttered toast under it to catch the runs. Working seniors in Cleveland called this Sunday breakfast on a Tuesday night, and they ate it slow, standing at the counter with the radio on low. Number 10, bacon grease gravy on toast. The bacon grease can on the back of a senior's counter was a small bank account. A heaping tablespoon of that saved grease, a heaping tablespoon of flour from the paper sack, and a slow stir in a warm skillet on the coil made a roux the color of weak coffee. She poured in a cup of canned, evaporated milk, thinned with water, a turn of black pepper, and let it tighten while she dropped 2 slices of light bread into the toaster. The gravy went from thin to thick in about 4 minutes, and she ladled it over the toast on her chip plate. Supper from nothing, for a nickel, on a night when the Social Security envelope had stretched as far as it was going to stretch. Number 9, hot plate cabbage, roll without the roll. Real cabbage rolls needed an oven, and most black seniors in walk-up apartments did not have one, so the dish bent itself to the coil. She browned a 1/4 pound of ground beef in her skillet with half a chopped onion, drained off the fat into the bacon grease can, and stirred in a cup of cooked rice from the morning's pot. Coarse chopped cabbage went in next, about 2 cups, with a small can of tomato sauce poured right over the top. Lid on, 20 minutes on low, and the cabbage steamed itself tender in the tomato broth. She called it lazy cabbage roll, and seniors in Detroit and Gary and East St. Louis ate it on a Wednesday night with a slice of light bread to sop the pan. Number 8, evaporated milk pudding on the coil. Here's the supper from the intro, the one our elders called grace, made from a can of evaporated milk on a single burner. A tall can of carnation cost about 17 cents at the corner store in the 1960s, and that can hold more comfort than the price suggested. A senior poured the milk into a small saucepan on her coil, stirred in 2 tablespoons of sugar and a tablespoon of cornstarch, slaked with cold water, and worked the spoon in a slow figure 8 for 7 minutes until the pudding thickened to the back of the spoon. A drop of vanilla, a shake of salt to wake the sweetness, and she poured the warm pudding into a chipped teacup to set on the windowsill. Black seniors in Harlem and on Chicago's South Side ate this on the nights the icebox was empty and fed it warm to grandmothers who could no longer chew. Number 7, hot dog and beans. Skillet, a pack of high-grade hot dogs cost about 45 cents at the Kroger in 1968, and a can of Van Camp's pork and beans, another 21. A senior with a coil could slice 2 hot dogs on the diagonal into a hot, dry skillet, let them brown and curl on the cut edges for 4 minutes, then pour the whole can of beans right over the top. The bean liquor bubbled and reduced while the hot dogs picked up the sweet molasses taste of the sauce. 5 more minutes, a turn of black pepper, and supper landed on her chipped plate beside a piece of folded light bread. Black grandfathers in Pittsburgh and Birmingham ate this on the porch in summer, calling it the cheap man's barbecue. 2 dogs to a can, 3 suppers to a pack, and the kitchen smelled like a ballpark on a senior's Social Security Tuesday. The lid stayed off the whole time so the sauce could thicken down to a sticky brown gravy that held the bread on the way to the mouth. Number 6, skillet stewed apples. A bruised apple from the bottom of the produce stand was often free if a senior asked the grocer kindly at closing time on Saturday, and 3 of those bruised apples turned into a whole week of suppers and breakfasts on the coil. She cored and quartered them with a paring knife worn down to a sliver, dropped them into a small skillet with a half cup of water, a knob of margarine, a spoon of brown sugar, and a shake of cinnamon from the tin. Lid on, 12 minutes on low, and the apples collapsed into something between sauce and stew. She ate them warm over a piece of light bread for supper, or cool from the icebox over a spoon of cornmeal mush for breakfast. Black widows in Newark and Cleveland kept a covered jar of these apples in the icebox all winter, spooning them over whatever the day brought, and the kitchen smelled like a country kitchen in Tennessee on the coldest nights. Number 5, hot plate smothered chicken backs. The butcher counter at the black-owned market on Hastings Street in Detroit kept a bin of chicken backs and necks the white grocers had thrown out, and a senior could buy 2 pounds for 35 cents in 1970. She salted them, dusted them in flour, and browned them slow in a heavy skillet with 2 spoons of bacon grease on the coil. A halved onion went in beside the bones, then a cup of water and a shake of poultry seasoning, and the lid came down for 40 minutes on low. The backs cooked off into a thin brown gravy that tasted like Sunday dinner, and she pulled the meat free with her fingers right at the table. 1 pot, 3 meals, and a kitchen that smelled like a grandmother's house. Number 4, cornbread in a skillet, no oven. The first time a senior moved into a rooming house with no oven, she thought cornbread was lost to her, and then she remembered her great aunt in Mound Bayou had baked it on a wood stove in a covered skillet for 50 years. She mixed a cup of meal, an egg, a teaspoon of baking powder, a shake of salt, and 3/4 cup of buttermilk in a chip bowl. Hot grease skillet on the coil, batter poured in, lid on, 12 minutes on low. The bottom crisped to a deep brown, the top set firm, and the whole thing slid out onto a saucer like a small golden moon. Supper for 1/4, breakfast tomorrow with butter, and crumbs saved for the buttermilk glass. Number 3, hot plate tea and toast supper. There were nights when a senior was too tired to cook, and the coil knew it. She set her kettle on the burner, dropped a Lipton bag in her favorite chip cup, and put 2 slices of light bread under the toaster while the water came up. The kettle whistled, she poured, and the toast popped at the same moment, the way the kitchen sometimes lined up. Butter on a toast, a spoon of saved jelly from the church canning jar, and the tea steeping while she pulled her housecoat tight. Black widows from the Carolinas to the Bronx had eaten this supper on lonely Wednesdays for as long as anyone could remember, and there was no shame in it. Sometimes supper is just warm bread and a quiet cup. Number 2, skillet smothered liver pudding. North Carolina seniors brought liver pudding north with them during the Great Migration, and by the 1970s, a 1-pound roll of Niece's liver pudding at the corner grocery in Newark or Philadelphia ran about 40 cents and fed a senior for 3 suppers running. She sliced it thick, about 1/2 inch, and laid 4 rounds in a hot skillet on the coil with no grease added because the pudding rendered its own. 3 minutes aside, the edges crisping the color of strong coffee, the inside still soft and savory. She slid the rounds onto a chip plate with a spoon of grits if she had them, and a slice of light bread if she did not. The taste was Carolina pine smoke, and a Sunday morning, even on a Tuesday night in a 1-room walk-up in a city her mother had never seen. Number 1, 1 egg, hot plate, supper. At the end of the month, when the Social Security check had thinned 2 coins in a coffee mug, a single egg from the corner store was the supper that closed the week. A senior set her smallest skillet on the coil with a quarter teaspoon of bacon grease from the can, cracked the egg careful into a chip saucer, first to check for shell, and slipped it into the warm pan. She salted it once, peppered it twice, and laid a slice of light bread next to the pan to toast in the rising heat. 3 minutes for the white to set, the yolk soft, the bread golden on the bottom. She lifted the egg onto the toast with a bent spatula, sat down at the kitchen table by the window, and ate slow. 1 egg, 1 slice, 1 coil, 1 widow, and a quiet supper that meant tomorrow was already here.
Batter-fried green tomatoes turned what could be an overlooked vegetable into a crispy, golden treat. Slices of firm, unripe tomatoes were dipped in a seasoned cornmeal batter, then fried until the edges crackled and the centers turned tender. The tartness of the tomato balanced the crunch of the coating, making each bite a mix of bright and savory flavors. Often served as a side dish or snack, they were a clever way to make use of tomatoes that had not yet ripened. In African American kitchens, they could appear at summer gatherings, church picnics, or even as a surprise addition to a weeknight dinner. Frying them in cast-iron skillets added an extra layer of flavor and a texture that no oven-baked version could replicate. Eaten hot with a sprinkle of salt, they had a simplicity that made them memorable. Over time, many home cooks stopped making them, as supermarkets favored shipping fully ripened tomatoes and cornmeal frying became less common in everyday cooking. Yet for those who grew up with batter-fried green tomatoes, the taste is still tied to summer afternoons and the joy of food cooked from the garden.
Fried corn in a skillet started in the garden and ended on a plate still steaming. Fresh corn was cut from the cob with a sharp knife, the blade scraping afterward to release the milky starch that made it creamy without cream. In winter, canned corn worked, drained and dried so it wouldn't spatter. Into the skillet with butter or bacon grease, salt, pepper, and a pinch of sugar to pull the sweetness forward. 3 or 4 minutes until the edges brown and caramelized, sugars turning golden, butter going nutty, the kitchen filling with a smell sweet enough to make you forget you were eating alone. For Black seniors in the rural South, fried corn was often the entire meal, a skillet's worth, maybe with bread, eaten at a table set for one. Stewed tomatoes over white rice sounds too simple to be a supper, and in a lot of 1960s households, it showed up when the week had gone tight, but that framing misses what she actually did to it. The tomatoes went into a saucepan with a generous spoon of butter and a pinch of sugar, the move nobody outside these kitchens knew about. The sugar cut the acid without making it sweet, and the butter rounded out the sharpness of the can. She let it reduce for 15 or 20 minutes until it thickened into something closer to a sauce. The rice was already done. She plated first and ladled the tomatoes over the top. Hot, enough that steam rose off the bowl. 3 ingredients, less than 15 minutes. Everything came down to 2 small details she never wrote down, and neither did anyone else.
Hoe cakes were a simple, satisfying food that came together from just cornmeal, water, and a pinch of salt, fried crisp on a hot skillet, or even on a flat hoe blade over an open fire in earlier times. They carried a taste of history, rooted in resourcefulness and the ability to make something delicious from the bare essentials. The texture was hearty yet tender, with a slight crunch at the edges and a comforting warmth in the middle. Served plain or with a drizzle of syrup, they made for a meal that could be eaten at any time of the day. In many African American homes, hoe cakes were not just food, but a connection to family traditions passed quietly through generations. They were quick to make, filling enough to sustain a long day's work and easy to prepare over whatever heat source was available. Today, they have nearly disappeared from daily kitchens, replaced by store-bought breads and processed mixes, but they still live on in the memories of those who grew up eating them hot from the skillet. Every bite was a reminder that good food did not need to be fancy to be special.
Grits with butter was breakfast, lunch, or dinner, depending on what you served alongside. Proof that the simplest dishes often provided the deepest comfort. Stone ground or regular grits were cooked slowly with water or milk, stirred frequently to prevent lumps, until they reached a creamy consistency that held its shape on a spoon. A generous pat of butter stirred in at the end added richness that transformed humble corn into something almost luxurious. For seniors on fixed incomes, grits cost pennies per serving and satisfied hunger for hours. They could be dressed up with cheese, topped with eggs, or served alongside fish, sausage, or vegetables. The dish required patience but little active work, and the reward was a bowl full of warmth that connected you to generations of Southern tables where grits was simply a part of life. The butter hit the hot iron first, then the corn, and the sizzle told you everything about how the next 5 minutes would go. Fried pork chops with pan drippings, gravy was built entirely on technique, and the technique lived in her hands. Blade-cut chops, the thin, bony ones that cost next to nothing, got seasoned hard, pressed into flour until coated white, then laid into hot lard with a sharp cracking hiss that meant the temperature was right. She'd cook them through until the crust was deep brown, then set them aside on a plate. Every bit of brown flour, rendered fat, and caramelized seasoning stuck to that cast iron was the foundation of what came next. Cold water went in, not broth, just water, and she'd work the bottom with a wooden spoon until everything loosened and rose up into the liquid, the heat pulling it all into a gravy that thickened on its own with no roux, no extra flour, just what the chops had left behind. If you had to ask how much water, you weren't ready to make it. She is gone now. That specific ratio of drippings to water, the one that made it taste like nothing else, left with her, and it has not come back.
Skillet candied yams were a feast for both the eyes and the taste buds, glistening in a thick glaze of butter, brown sugar, and spices. Sweet potatoes were peeled and sliced thick, then arranged in a cast-iron skillet where they simmered gently in the sweet, buttery syrup. Cinnamon and nutmeg added warmth, while the natural sugars from the potatoes deepened the caramelization. This was not a quick dish. The yams were left to cook slowly until every slice was tender and every surface was coated with the glossy glaze. The smell alone could draw family members into the kitchen, eager for a taste before the meal was served. On holiday tables, this side dish often sat beside savory meats, providing a sweet contrast that balanced the plate. In everyday meals, it was a treat that made even a humble dinner feel special. Supermarkets today offer canned versions, but they cannot replicate the rich, layered flavor of fresh yams caramelized in a skillet. For those who remember, the first bite of skillet candied yams was pure Southern comfort, the kind that lingered long after the plate was clean.
When the grocery money ran out 3 days before the check came, eggs and rice with tomato gravy kept the lights on inside the body. This was Depression-era arithmetic carried through generations of black kitchens. A dozen eggs for 30 cents in the 1940s, a cup of rice from a bulk sack, and a can of tomatoes that stretched across 2 meals. Rice cooked plain, eggs scrambled soft in a skillet with butter or bacon grease, pulled off the heat while still wet so they wouldn't turn rubbery. The tomato gravy came together in the same pan. Canned tomatoes crushed by hand, a little sugar to cut the acid, salt, and a spoonful of flour to thicken it. Everything went into one bowl. Eggs on rice, gravy over both. And for a few minutes, the kitchen smelled like someone was taking care of you, even if that someone was yourself. The old ones could tell by the color of the gravy whether it had been made with love or just made to get through. Nobody talked about this one at the family reunion, but everyone knew. Salmon patties showed up at least once a week in most African American households through the 1960s, and the way she made them had nothing to do with the recipe card. A tall can of pink salmon got emptied into a bowl, bones included. The liquid drained, but set aside to pour over rice later. Crackers went in next, not breadcrumbs, crushed between her palms, right over the bowl, along with a beaten egg, diced onion, a spoon of mustard, black pepper, and salt. The mix got shaped into thick rounds and pressed firm so they'd hold together in the grease. Cast iron got hot, not warm, hot, before the first patty went in. You could hear the difference between a skillet that was ready and one that wasn't. She knew by the sound. They fried golden and crackling on the outside, tender all the way through. Nobody who grew up eating them can explain what she did differently. They just know nobody else gets it right.
Potlikker soup was more than just a humble broth. It was the essence of the greens it came from. When collards, turnip greens, or mustard greens simmered slowly with a bit of seasoning and maybe a ham bone, the cooking liquid would take on a deep, savory flavor and a rich, earthy aroma. Nothing in the kitchen went to waste, and that potlikker was treasured for its nourishment, especially in leaner times. It was often sipped straight from a bowl or paired with cornbread, which was crumbled right into the broth to soak up every last drop. This soup carried vitamins, minerals, and memories of long afternoons spent around the table, talking as the pot bubbled on the stove. In African American kitchens, it was both medicine and comfort, believed to restore strength after illness or a hard day's work. The taste was unmistakable, salty, smoky, and green all at once, with each batch a little different depending on the greens and the cook. Today, store-bought greens rarely yield the same kind of rich cooking liquid, and many younger cooks have never tasted this kitchen staple. Yet for those who remember, potlikker was a liquid link to home.
Fried bologna with white bread was a 10-cent dinner that showed up on tables across every black neighborhood in the 1960s and 70s. Not because anyone planned it, but because the refrigerator was low and the energy was lower. A thick slice of Oscar Mayer or store-brand bologna went into a dry skillet over medium heat. Without those slits, 2 cuts like a cross, the meat would dome up in the center and burn at the edges. Done right, the bologna curled slightly, browned in spots, and developed a salty crust that no fancy charcuterie could match. Laid on soft white bread with yellow mustard or a smear of mayonnaise, it was dinner in 4 minutes. Some added a slice of American cheese, others put hot sauce on the bread first, and the old folks who ate it alone at night, they didn't need sides. Just a sandwich, a glass of sweet tea, and the television on low. Smothered chicken and rice was the supper that could silence a table full of hungry people in 30 seconds. She'd cut the chicken herself, season every surface hard with salt, black pepper, garlic powder, and paprika, dredge each piece in flour, and set it in hot lard until the skin turned a deep, crackling gold. When the chicken came out, every brown bit and rendered drop of fat stayed in the skillet. Sliced onions went in, stirred and scraped until they softened and picked up all that color from the bottom of the pan. Water went in next, the flour from the dredging thickening it as it simmered. And then the chicken went back in with the lid on low for 45 minutes until the meat had pulled from the bone and the gravy had gone deep brown and rich. Over long grain white rice, it was a supper that cost almost nothing and tasted like it cost everything. The last person who made it exactly right has been gone a long time. That gravy has never been quite the same since, no matter how many times someone tries.
Mustard greens with ham hock was a pot of comfort that simmered slowly, filling the kitchen with a savory aroma that promised a satisfying meal. The slightly bitter greens were washed thoroughly, then cooked low and slow with a smoked ham hock, which released its flavor into the broth. As the meat softened, it was shredded into the greens, creating a perfect mix of smoky, salty, and earthy tastes. This dish was often ladled into bowls alongside cornbread, which soaked up the flavorful potlikker at the bottom. It was a year-round favorite, but especially welcome in cooler months when hearty, warming food was needed. The ham hock was not just a flavoring, It represented the tradition of making the most of every cut of meat, ensuring nothing went to waste. Supermarkets today sell pre-washed greens and pre-cooked meats, but they lack the depth of flavor that comes from a slow afternoon simmering on the stove. For many, mustard greens with ham hock were not just food. They were part of the rhythm of home life, where patience in the kitchen always paid off.
Vienna sausages, straight from the tin, were the dinner that happened when dinner didn't happen. When the legs were tired, the stove felt too far, and the body just needed something before bed. The small can popped open with the pull tab, and the pale little sausages sat in their broth like something between a meal and an apology. Eaten cold with saltines and a squirt of yellow mustard, or picked up with fingers one at a time, this was a dinner measured in silence. It cost 35 cents in the 1970s. It required nothing, no cooking, no plates if you didn't want one, no effort beyond pulling the tab. For seniors living alone in small apartments after their families moved away, this was Tuesday night and Wednesday and sometimes Friday. Nobody judged it out loud because everyone had a can in the cabinet. The people who ate Vienna sausages for dinner weren't ashamed. They were tired, and tired is its own kind of hungry. The pinto bean pot was a Monday institution in African American households because Monday was wash day, the day the laundry needed tending from morning to dusk, and nothing on the stove could require constant attention. Dried pintos, soaked overnight, went into the pot first thing with a block of fatback rinsed to knock off some of the salt. The fatback rendered down over hours, its fat releasing slowly into the bean water and turning the whole pot silky in a way no seasoning packet could replicate. She'd set it on the back burner at the lowest heat and leave it alone until late afternoon, adding water once or twice when the level dropped. By supper time, the beans had absorbed everything the fatback had given, the potlikker had gone thick and starchy, and the whole house smelled of something deep and slow and patient. Cornbread went into the cast iron around 4:30. Supper was on the table by 5, and nobody had to ask what was for dinner because they'd been smelling it since 9 in the morning. The Monday bean pot didn't need a recipe. It needed a whole day and the kind of patience that doesn't pass down easily anymore.
Hog brains and eggs was once a breakfast staple in rural communities, valued for being inexpensive, high in protein, and deeply flavorful. The brains were cleaned, seasoned, and sautéed until tender, then folded into scrambled eggs for a creamy texture and rich taste, unlike anything else. This dish was often cooked in a cast-iron skillet, where the residual heat helped meld the flavors together. Served with biscuits or grits, it was a hearty start to the day for those working long hours in the fields or factories. In many African American households, it was both a practical and cultural dish, rooted in the tradition of using every part of the animal. Its preparation carried the knowledge of how to clean and cook ingredients that many today would pass over. Over time, changing tastes and supermarket offerings pushed hog brains out of everyday cooking, and with it went the skill to prepare them well. While it may seem unusual to modern diners, for those who grew up with it, hog brains and eggs were just breakfast, warm, filling, and made with care.
Tomato sandwiches with mayonnaise only appeared when the garden came in. That short window in July and August when the tomatoes were heavy, warm from the vine, and red all the way through. This was never a winter meal. The tomato had to be sliced thick, almost a 1/4 inch, laid on soft white bread, spread with Duke's mayonnaise, always Duke's in the South, where brand loyalty ran deeper than politics. Salt and black pepper on top, nothing else. The bread soaked through from the juice within seconds, and you ate it fast, leaning over the plate so it didn't drip down your wrist. For seniors who still kept a small garden or had a neighbor who brought tomatoes by, this sandwich was the taste of summer itself. No cooking, no heat from the stove, and a sweetness from the fruit that made the meal feel like a gift. Once the season passed, it was gone, and waiting for it to come back was part of what made it matter. A half pound of ground beef could become a full dinner if you knew what to do with the grease left behind. Make one of these suppers this week on whatever single burner you have and sit down at the table for it, not in front of the television. Set a real plate, pour a real glass, let the kitchen smell like something for 10 quiet minutes. Our elders did not cook on a coil because they were poor in spirit. They cooked that way because supper is not about the stove. It is about the sitting down, the saying of grace, the slow chewing in a room that knows your name. A hot plate fed a whole generation of Black seniors, and what it served was proof that a life lived simply is still a life lived whole.